The brush caught on my boots the whole way down the fence line, dry palmetto fronds dragging against the sand with each step. I had a load of it bundled under one arm, cut that morning, headed for the burn pile at the south edge of the clearing. My phone had said no signal since we turned off State Road 19 40 minutes south, and it still said no signal now, but I checked it anyway out of habit. I almost walked past the sign. It was nailed at eye level to a long-leaf pine, plywood, hand-painted, a blue border around the edge like somebody wanted it to look official. Black letters underneath. Game cameras active. Do not use Trail 4 between sunset and sunrise. Under that, smaller, if you hear the horn, stay where you are and make noise. I dropped the brush and read it again. Stay where you are and make noise are not the same instruction. One tells you to hold still. The other tells you to give yourself away. I stood there working that over, the way you'd work over a math problem that didn't balance, and it still didn't balance the second time through. I took a picture of it. No signal, but the photo saved anyway. I left the brush where it was and walked back to the equipment shed. Dad was bent over the tractor battery with a wire brush, cleaning corrosion off the terminals. I told him he needed to see something. He didn't ask what. He just set the brush down on the fender and followed me back down the fence line, boots crunching sandpine needles, not saying much of anything until we were standing in front of the pine, reading it slow, lips barely moving. He tapped the plywood twice with 2 fingers. Look, it's probably the Forestry Service putting up liability signs, he said, or one of the hunting clubs covering themselves. Trail 4 is just a fire break. Nobody uses it for anything. I looked at the sign again. I looked at him. The cameras aren't pointed at the tree line, I said. They're pointed at the trail. I hadn't seen a camera yet. I was just saying what the sign implied. He didn't argue the point. He just looked at me for a second like he was deciding whether to say something else, and then he didn't. Part of me wanted to know whether he'd ever come across a sign like it before. 2 years he'd had this lease. I figured he'd have noticed a plywood sign with a blue border nailed to a tree somewhere along the fence line before now if there'd been one. I didn't ask. He didn't ask me either. Not if this was the first one I'd found. Not if there'd been others he'd missed. He just turned and started back toward the cabins, and I picked up my armload of brush again and followed him. The question sat there in the space between us the whole walk back, carried along like another thing we were hauling to the burn pile. The clearing opened up ahead of us, the 5 cabins gray and weathered around it, and the smell of the propane stove was already drifting out from the kitchen window where lunch was heating. Neither one of us said anything else. We climbed the steps to the cabin and let the door swing shut behind us. Supper was beans and rice and some venison sausage Dad had thawed that morning. We ate on the porch, the 2 of us on folding chairs with paper plates on our knees, watching the light go orange and then gray over the clearing. Tomorrow we do the water lines, Dad said. Drain them before it gets cold enough to crack a pipe. And the shutters. The 2 cabins on the east side first. Wood's already soft on those. I don't want another winter getting at them. Propane tanks too. Propane tanks too. He chewed for a second. We'll get the truck loaded Thursday, head out Friday morning. From the porch you could see the whole camp laid out the way it always sits. 5 cabins ringing the clearing, the burn pile down at the south end, black and low, and past it the gap in the fence where Trail 4 starts, a darker seam running east into the scrub. The sun was behind the tree line by then. The gap looked like a mouth. We talked through the rest of the list. Filters, the generator, whether the propane company was going to charge extra for a Saturday pickup like they did last year. Then the horn went. I checked my phone before I even decided to. 9:14. The sound came from the southeast, from somewhere past the fire break, low and long, and it wasn't like a truck horn or anything with an edge to it. It was flatter than that. It sat in my chest before it hit my ears. Dad set his fork down. Hendricks Camp, he said. They're about 2 miles south of us. Do that every season, end of the hunting day. Signal to call the dogs in." "You've heard it before." He paused. Half a second, maybe less. But I was watching his face and I caught it. "Yeah," he said. I looked at the tree line at the east edge of the clearing. The palmetto out there didn't move. No wind in it, no shape passing through it, nothing. I kept watching anyway, past the point where there was any reason to, past the point where Dad had picked his fork back up and gone on eating like nothing had happened. I thought about the sign nailed to that pine. Stay where you are. Make noise. 2 things you can't do at the same time, not really. I noticed that again now, sitting there with beans going cold on my plate. Dad didn't say anything else about the horn. He finished his supper and started talking about whether we should replace the porch screen before winter or wait till spring. I didn't answer him. I sat there a few minutes more, watching the dark come down over that gap in the fence. Then I got up, went inside, and closed the cabin door behind me. The tree line was still and dark through the window. I woke up before my alarm, the way I always do the first few days in a new place, my body still running on some other clock. The cabin was cold. I pulled on my boots without socks and went out to the porch to see what the morning looked like over the clearing. The porch looked wrong right away. There was a sign propped against the porch post, 8 feet from where we'd sat the night before with our plates going cold. Same blue border, same hand lettering, the paint a little thick in the loops of the letters the way it had been on the pine tree. I didn't touch it. I stood there and read it twice. The way I'd read the first one twice, except this time I wasn't checking it for a contradiction. I was checking it because I didn't believe it was really there. "You already heard the horn." I said Dad's name. Not loud, just enough to get him moving. He came out in his undershirt, hair flat on one side, and he stopped the same way I had, one boot still half-laced. He looked at the sign for a long time. Longer than it takes to read 6 words. I counted it. Almost 30 seconds. "Hendrix," he said finally. "Their youngest boy. He's pulled stunts like this before." "Someone walked up here in the dark," I said, 8 feet from where we were sitting. "That's what I said." He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Kid probably waited till we went in. Probably watched the window go dark and figured that was his chance." I didn't say anything to that. I was doing the math instead. 8 feet, a cabin wall between us and them, and a screen door that didn't latch right. If 2 people are close enough to plant a sign 8 feet from a porch, they're close enough to hear whatever's being said on that porch, if there's anything being said. We hadn't been talking, not by then. But we could have been. Dad pulled the sign off the post. It came away easy, no nails. Just leaned there like whoever left it, wanted it found and wanted it easy to take down. He carried it past me down the porch steps and across the clearing to the burn pile, and I followed him because I didn't know what else to do with myself. He didn't say anything while he walked. He dropped it in on top of the palmetto brush we'd hauled the day before, plywood side up, that painted sentence facing the sky. "Got a lighter in my pocket," he said, and got the pile going. The paint caught first, blistering black before the wood did, the blue border curling up at the edges like it was trying to get away from the flame. I watched the letters go. "You already," then just fire. I didn't argue with him. It would have been easy to stand there and ask him how a 15-year-old Hendrix kid would know to match the lettering on a sign nailed to a tree 40 yards down Trail 4, a sign he hadn't seen, and I hadn't told him I'd photographed twice as carefully. I didn't say it. I let him burn it. We walked back up to the cabin without talking. He made eggs, and neither one of us brought the sign up again, even when he told me the water lines on cabin 3 still needed draining before we lost the morning. I sat there a while after he'd gone out to the shed. Through the kitchen window I could see the burn pile, a thin gray line of smoke still lifting off it, going nowhere in the still air. By the middle of the afternoon, Dad was in the shed, running a wrench over something that squealed every time he turned it. I told him I was going to walk the fence line out past the gap, check for any downed sections before we had to worry about it in the dark. That part was true. 100 yards, I said. He didn't look up. He just said fine, and went back to the wrench. The sign was the real reason. I knew that before I got to the gap, and I didn't try to talk myself out of it. Trail 4 started as a scrape through the palmetto, wide enough for a truck once, grown in some since. The fence gap sat at the edge of the clearing, 2 strands of wire pushed down flat where feet had crossed it more than once. I stepped over and kept walking. 40 yards in, more or less, I found the first camera. It was mounted on a long-leaf pine at about chest height, strapped on with a ratchet band, the kind of unit that costs real money. Not the plastic box you buy at a feed store. This one had a black housing with a stub antenna on top, a cellular transmitter, and the front cover was cracked open an inch, like whoever serviced it had been in a hurry. Inside, I could see 4 batteries, and they looked new. No rust on the contacts, no grime on the casing. I stood there a second before I understood what was wrong with it. It wasn't pointed at the brush. Every trail camera I've ever seen is aimed across a trail, catching whatever crosses left to right. That's how animals move, cutting through instead of walking down the middle of a clear path. This one was aimed straight down the trail. Straight at me, more or less, if I kept walking the way I was walking. I took the photo anyway. No signal, same as everything else out here, but it saved. I kept going. At 70 yards, there was another one. Same brand, same strap, same height, same crack in the housing like someone had opened it in the field and closed it wrong. And it was aimed the same way. Down the trail, not across it. I stopped walking for a minute, just breathing, listening to nothing. At 90 yards, a third. I didn't need to check the angle on that one. I already knew what I'd see, and I saw it. Straight down the trail, toward the scrub past it, toward anyone coming from the direction I'd just come from. 3 cameras, same model, same height, same angle. You don't aim a wildlife camera at a footpath. You aim it at the places wildlife actually moves, the game trails cutting off into the brush, the water crossings, the places deer and hogs funnel through without thinking about it. These weren't watching for animals, they were watching for people. Somebody had set them up because somebody expected people to walk this exact trail, and they wanted a record of it when they did. I thought about who checks batteries on a unit like that. Somebody drives out, somebody hikes in, somebody opens that little door and swaps the cells and closes it again, on a schedule, because a device that's been abandoned doesn't have fresh batteries in it. Somebody was still doing that. Recently. I didn't go further. I turned around and walked back the way I'd come, past 90 yards, past 70, past 40, past the gap in the fence, and I didn't run. My legs wanted to, and I didn't let them. Dad was standing outside the shed when I came back into the clearing, wiping his hands on a rag, looking at me the way he looks at a fence line before he's walked it, already halfway to an answer. "Fence hold up out there?" he said. "Looked fine," I said. "Wire's a little loose by the gap, but it's not down anywhere." He nodded like that settled something and went back into the shed. I didn't tell him about the cameras. I didn't tell him about the batteries, or the angle, or the way all 3 of them were pointed at exactly where a person's chest would be if they were standing in the middle of that trail. I went inside instead and let the screen door shut soft behind me. We were watching a movie on Dad's laptop when the horn came again. 9:40. I checked my phone, the way I'd checked it the night before. 26 minutes later than last time, but the same direction. Southeast. Same flat, low note that didn't sound like anything a truck or a boat could make. Dad went rigid, not slow. All at once, like something had reached into him and pulled a wire tight. "Inside," he said. "Lock the door. Don't touch the porch light." I was already inside. He said it anyway. He got up and crossed to the gun cabinet in the corner of the front room, the one that had sat there since before I could remember. He took out the .308, the one he used for hogs when they got into the garden plots behind the shed. He worked the bolt once, checked it, and closed it soft. Then he sat down in the kitchen, in the dark, in the chair that faced the door, and set the rifle across his lap. "Dad," I said. He didn't answer right away. "What's happening?" I said. Not a question. He was quiet for a while, long enough that I thought he wasn't going to say anything at all. "I've heard things at this camp for 2 years," he said. "Never been sure enough to say anything out loud." I sat down across from him. The window behind him showed the clearing, gray and empty, the tree line a black wall past the burn pile. "The horn goes," he said. "About 20 minutes after, something moves along the tree line. Heavy, slow. Not a deer. A deer runs, or it doesn't move at all. This isn't either one." He looked at the window like he expected it to answer for him. "I've never seen it clear. Never once." "What did you think it was?" I told myself it was the Hendricks camp, running their dogs with a call and response. The horns the handler's signal, the movements just the dogs working the edge of the scrub. He turned the rifle a quarter inch on his knees, not aiming it, just moving it. I told myself that for 2 years. I don't know if I believed it. I didn't say anything. Outside, nothing moved. The clock on the microwave read 10:01. At 10:02, the brush at the east edge of the clearing started to move. It wasn't fast. That was the first thing I noticed, before I could even find the shape of it in the dark. It wasn't the crash a deer makes when it's been spooked, all at once and gone. This was slow, deliberate. I could hear the palmetto fronds bending and dragging against something and then letting go, one after another, evenly spaced, like a man walking through them on purpose and taking his time about it. Dad didn't move. I didn't either. It came out of the scrub at the corner of the fence line and stopped at the burn pile. It stood there. I started counting. 1, 2, 3. I couldn't see it well enough to say what it was. A shape, darker than the dark around it, tall, not moving. The palmetto near it had gone still. Everything had gone still. 4 minutes. I counted every second of it, all the way through. Then it turned, and the brush started up again, the same slow bending and letting go, moving away this time instead of toward. And after a while, there was nothing. No sound at all. The clearing sat there gray and quiet like it had never held anything. Dad didn't get up. I wanted to ask him what he thought it was. I had the words most of the way out, and I didn't say them. He sat in that chair for over an hour. I sat across from him and didn't sleep, and neither of us turned on a single light in the cabin, and the only sound in the room was the refrigerator clicking on and off and the wind picking at the shutters on the east side. At 11:30, he finally set the rifle down across his knees, and the clearing outside the window was silent. Dad told me not to go past the fence line. He didn't say it like an order, more like a fact he expected me to already agree with, but I got up before he did that morning and I walked out past the tree line anyway. The 3 cameras were right where they'd been. Same trunks, same height, same little red light blinking under the housing like a heartbeat. I stopped in front of each one and looked at where they pointed, and each one pointed straight down the trail, at nothing, at whoever might be walking through. 90 yards was as far as I'd gone before. I kept walking. The scrub thinned out after that, and the sand under my boots went pale and loose, and then the trail just opened up into a clearing about 30 feet across, flat and bare like something had scraped it clean a long time ago. There was a shed in the middle of it. Metal, gray, about the size of a garden shed, with a solar panel bolted to the roof at an angle to catch the sun. A cable ran off the bottom of it, thick as my wrist, and went straight down into the sand like a root. The door had a padlock on it, rusted at the hasp, but the lock itself looked new. Above the lock, painted on plywood with the same blue border as the other two signs, it said, Horn Control, Wildlife Study, Unit 7, Ocala, Research Cooperative. Underneath that, scratched into the metal itself, not painted, gouged out with something like a screwdriver, in different letters than the sign above it, Not a Study. And below that, same scratched hand, It follows the sound. I stood there for a while. I took pictures. The shed, the sign, the scratching, the solar panel, the cable going into the ground. I turned in a slow circle and took a picture of the clearing too, though there wasn't much to see, just sand and scrub and the trail going back the way I'd come. The horn had a source. It wasn't a man on a porch with a bugle 2 miles south. It was this, a box in the woods with a solar panel on top so it never had to run out of power, running down a wire to something buried out there that made a sound. On a timer, maybe. Or on something else. The cameras weren't watching for deer. They were watching the trail for whoever walked down it after the sound went out. I started back. At the first camera, the one at 40 yards, there was a flat rock at the base of the pine, sitting a little too square, like it had been set there instead of settled there. I turned it over. There was an envelope under it. Manila, unsealed, no name on it, no address, just sitting in a shallow dent in the sand like it had been waiting. I opened it there on the trail. 4 pages, typed, the header the same on all of them, Ocala Research Cooperative, Acoustic Lure Trial Series, Unit 7, Field Notes, dated 3 years back. The first page read like something out of a textbook. Decibel output, timing intervals, camera placement specifications, angle and height given down to the inch. It called the horn an acoustic lure, engineered to trigger territorial approach behavior in a large, unclassified species with demonstrated acoustic sensitivity. I read that line twice, and it still didn't mean anything to me except that it meant they didn't know what it was, or they weren't saying. The second and third pages were more of the same, cold, careful. Writing that didn't want you to feel anything. The fourth page had a margin note, handwritten, in blue pen gone a little gray with age. Subjects entered lure zone during horn test 4. Did not return. I read it twice. Subjects. Not deer, not hogs, not the unclassified species with the acoustic sensitivity. The rest of the document used that word for the people running the trial, the ones with the cameras and the decibel meters, the ones standing where I was standing now. 4 of them had walked into the trail during an active test and nobody had written down that they came back out. I stood there holding the pages, and I looked back east toward the shed, though I couldn't see it anymore through the scrub, and then I looked west toward camp, where the smoke from breakfast would be coming out of the chimney by now. Then I walked back. I didn't run. I wanted to, some, but I didn't. Dad was at the stove when I came in, and Hatch was on the kitchen floor by the table, and neither of them looked up right away. I walked in, and I set the 4 pages down on the table in front of him. Dad picked up the pages and read them. He read the first one, then the second, and he didn't say anything. His face didn't do much of anything either. When he got to the last page, he slowed down, and I watched his eyes move over the handwriting in the margin, back and forth, twice. Then he set the pages down flat on the table and squared them up with his fingers, like they were papers from the county about the lease. 2 seasons ago, he said, I found one of these, same as this, tucked up under the porch steps, where you'd never see it unless you were looking. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the pages. I burned it, he said. That's what I did. I put it in the pile and watched it go. Hatch lifted his head off the floor at the sound of Dad's voice, then put it back down. Why? I said. Not really a question. I already knew the shape of the answer, but I wanted him to say it out loud, in the kitchen, in the daylight. Dad rubbed a hand over his jaw. I didn't want to know what it meant, he said. That's it. That's the whole reason. He looked at the window over the sink for a second, out at the clearing. We keep renewing the lease because the rate's cheap, he said. That's true. But it's not the only reason. If I said something, if I called somebody, that meant I already knew. And I'd been out here doing nothing about it. The kitchen was quiet except for the stove, which was still on low, something in the pan gone past ready. 18 months ago, he said, a man came out here. Said his name was Brett Newman. Said he was a biologist, contracted to the cooperative. He said the name without expression. He told me the cooperative was done, wrapping up, said the cameras were coming out, the horn unit was getting shut down, said there was nothing to worry about. The cameras are still running, I said. I saw the lights. Dad nodded. I know, he said. He didn't say anything else. He just sat there with his hands flat on the table on either side of the pages. Outside the window, the light was coming up over the tree line the way it does out here, slow and orange through the pines, and neither one of us moved. Dad stood up from the table first. He didn't say we were leaving. He just picked up his keys off the hook by the door and carried the propane wrench out to the truck, and I followed him. We loaded in silence. The coolers, the tackle boxes, the folded tarps from the shed. Hatch had been on the kitchen floor when we came in with the pages, curled up near the stove the way he always was, and I remember thinking he hadn't lifted his head at either of us. I went back for the last load. The porch was empty. The cabin door was still open the way we'd left it, and I went through calling his name, low. He wasn't inside. I found him at the edge of the clearing, near the burn pile, lying on his side in the dirt. His eyes were open. Hatch, I said. Nothing. I crouched down and put my hand flat on his ribs and felt them moving, slow and even, in and out. His eyes were open and wet and pointed at nothing. Hey, I said, and touched his ear, and he didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't do anything at all. I looked up at the burn pile. His collar was sitting on the rim of it, not in the ash, on the rim, on top of a piece of blackened plywood, set there flat. It hadn't burned. It hadn't even singed. I picked him up. He didn't resist. He didn't help either. He was just weight, warm and breathing and completely still, and I carried him across the clearing to the truck with my arms starting to shake before I even got there. Dad saw him over my shoulder. He looked at Hatch, and then he looked at the burn pile, and his face didn't do anything. He didn't ask what happened. He got in the truck and put it in reverse. I got in the back with Hatch across my lap, one hand on his side just to feel him breathing, and we came around the loop past the cabins and out toward the clearing's mouth where the fence gap opened onto the fire road. That was when the horn went. The sun was straight up. Noon light, flat and white across the sand, no shadows anywhere, and the horn came anyway. The same low note it had come at night, except now I could see everything. The tree line, the whole clearing. Nothing to hide behind and nothing hiding. I looked at the east tree line. Something was standing there, upright, still, at the edge of the pines where the scrub started, not moving, not swaying the way brush does in wind, just standing there facing the truck. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 1 bar. The first bar of signal I'd had since we got here, and under it a notification, a voicemail, left 6 minutes ago from a number I didn't know. I played it on speaker with my thumb because I couldn't get my hands to work right. Look, Dad's voice said. Stay at the camp. I forgot something in the equipment shed. I'll be right back. Just wait for me there. It was his voice, his cadence, the way he starts a thing with the word look like he's about to explain something he's already decided. It came out of the phone in my lap while he sat 6 inches from me in the driver's seat. He hadn't made a call. He hadn't spoken since we got in the truck. He didn't look at the phone. He put it in drive and pulled out of the clearing, and the tires threw sand for a second before they caught the fire road. And after that, he didn't look at anything but the road in front of him. Not the mirror. Not once. The whole 40 minutes to the highway. His hands on the wheel were white at the knuckles the entire way, and I held the phone in my lap and didn't play it again. Hatch breathed against my leg the whole drive, slow and even, eyes open, watching nothing. We came up on State Road 19, and the trees fell away on both sides, and there were other cars, ordinary cars, going ordinary places. Dad's grip loosened on the wheel, and neither of us said a word about the voicemail. It had been 3 weeks, and the house felt normal again. The heat in Florida in November had backed off some, and Dad hadn't said anything about the camp since we got home. Hatch slept most days now, but the sleep wasn't peaceful. He'd twitch and wake himself up. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a glass of water going warm next to it, and I typed Brett Newman into the search bar of the state's contractor licensing page. It came back fast. Brett Newman, wildlife biologist, contracted to the Ocala Research Cooperative. 6 years listed under his name, then nothing. The cooperative's operating permit had been revoked. There was a link to the revocation document, and I clicked it. It loaded slowly, a scanned page with a case number stamped across the top. I read it twice. The first reason for revocation was failure to properly decommission acoustic lure infrastructure. I sat with that phrase for a second. It meant the horn. It meant they were supposed to shut it down and didn't. The second reason was unresolved incidents involving study personnel. Below that was a table, 4 rows, 4 names, 4 dates, and a column that just said, "Departed without exit documentation for every one of them." 4 people. That was the number from the margin note, the one on the last page of the protocol I'd carried back to the kitchen table at camp. Subjects entered lure zone during horn test 4. Did not return. I told myself at the time that subjects might mean something else, something looser. But the table made it exact. 4 researchers walked into that scrub past Trail 4, and the state of Florida never got a form back saying they walked out. I didn't say any of this out loud. There was nobody in the kitchen to say it to. Dad was in the garage doing something to the truck that didn't need doing. I closed the tab and opened my email. I wrote to the district office for the Ocala National Forest, the Florida Forest Service address I found at the bottom of a page about permits and fire restrictions. I kept it short. I said I'd found signage and camera equipment on a leased hunting camp off Forest Road 88, east of Salt Springs, referencing something called Study Unit 7 and the Ocala Research Cooperative. I asked whether the lure units tied to that unit were still active, and whether a decommissioning order had ever been carried out. I read it once before sending it, then sent it anyway. I set my phone face down on the table and waited. My phone stayed dark on the table for 2 days. I checked it in the mornings before school, and again at night, out of habit more than hope. Nothing. I started to think the district office would let it sit in some queue and never open it at all. Then, on Thursday, it rang while I was doing homework at the kitchen table. Unknown number, local area code. I let it ring twice before I answered. Colin Chandler? Yes. This is Aurora Mercado with the Florida Forest Service District Office. You sent us an email about some signage and camera equipment near Salt Springs. I did. I want to follow up on that. She had a careful way of talking, like she was reading from something even when she wasn't. I put my pencil down. The acoustic lure protocol you referenced was never submitted for state approval, she said. The cooperative was running that trial series without authorization. Is it still running? A decommissioning order was issued for Unit 7 and 2 other units approximately 2 years ago. That order has not been confirmed as completed. I didn't say anything for a second. She waited, like she was used to people needing the second. So, it's still active, I said. That is consistent with what you observed. Where exactly did you encounter the signage? I told her. The camp lease off Forest Road 88, east of the Salt Springs area, the trail running out from the fence line into the scrub. I kept my voice even. I didn't tell her about the horn, or Hatch, or the man who came out and told my dad the unit was already gone. I don't know why. She went quiet. The silence went on longer than a pause for thinking would. I'll send someone to inspect the camp and the trail, she said finally. Please don't go back in the meantime. Okay. I mean that, Colin. I understand. I sat with the phone against my ear and looked at the window over the sink. It was still light outside, ordinary light, a car going by on the street. Can I ask you something? I said. You can ask. What was the lure designed to attract? There was a pause before she answered, shorter than the last one, but still there. The cooperative's official file uses the term unclassified large mammal. That's not an answer. It's the language the study uses. It hasn't produced a classification. But there's other language, I said. You said internal notes. The cooperative's internal notes were subpoenaed as part of the permit revocation. What word do they use? She didn't answer right away. I heard something on her end. A chair, maybe, or a door. I'm not going to tell you that, she said. Why not? Colin, please don't go back to the camp. I already said I understood that. I know, she said. I'm asking you to actually do it. The call ended a second later. Not abruptly, not a hang-up mid-sentence, just a clean stop, like she had decided exactly where the conversation was going to end and had walked it there on purpose. I sat at the table holding the phone a while after the screen went dark. Outside, somebody's sprinkler kicked on. I set the phone on the kitchen table, face up this time, and the words she wouldn't say sat there in the quiet with me. Hatch was on the kitchen floor most days now, near the vent where the air conditioner blew warm, and he did not get up for much. He used to get up for everything. A car door 2 houses down, a squirrel on the fence. Now he lay flat with his chin on his paws and let the world happen around him, and only certain things reached him at all. A door closing too hard would make him flinch, ears back, like the sound had touched something raw. The neighbor's truck backfiring did the same thing. Once, a delivery truck idled outside for a minute with its engine running low, and Hatch's whole body went stiff on the floor, and he did not relax again until it pulled away. He would not go outside after dark. Dad stopped asking him to. Dad would open the back door at night, out of old habit, and then just stand there a second with his hand on the frame and call Hatch's name once, soft, and when Hatch didn't come, he'd close the door again without saying anything about it. He never asked twice. I never asked him why he stopped. I was at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me, face up, the way I'd left it after the call ended. The house was quiet. Outside the window over the sink, the yard was dark, the shape of the fence just barely there against the sky, nothing moving. Hatch lifted his head. He was near the back door, farther from the vent than he usually let himself get these days, and his head came up slow and turned toward the door and stopped there. I watched him. He did not bark. He did not growl. He just held that angle, ears already flattening back against his skull. And then the trembling started. It wasn't a shiver. A shiver is quick. It passes through and lets go. This did not let go. It ran through his whole body at once and stayed there, steady, his legs shaking under him, his sides moving fast and shallow. And he did not try to get up, and he did not try to move away from the door. He just faced it and shook. I listened. I heard the refrigerator cycle on. I heard my own breathing. I heard nothing from outside, no truck, no door, no dog barking somewhere down the block. Nothing that should have reached a dog on a kitchen floor and done that to him. The yard stayed dark and still through the window. Nothing crossed it. No shape came to the fence line. There was just the black shape of the grass and the black shape of the fence, and Hatch shaking on the floor at a door that hadn't moved. I thought about the protocol pages, the clinical language running clean for 3 pages and then breaking on the 4th, engineered to trigger territorial approach behavior, demonstrated acoustic sensitivity. I hadn't understood, reading it at the kitchen table with Dad across from me, what sensitivity meant in practice, what it looked like in a body. It meant a frequency I could not hear reaching a dog who could, and going through him like current through wire and not letting go. Hatch did not look at me. He kept his eyes on the door. I did not get up. I did not go to the door and look out. I did not call his name or tell him it was okay, because I did not know that it was, and I was not going to lie to him about it. I sat very still and let my hands rest flat on the table on either side of the phone, and the phone stayed dark and quiet. No bars, no calls, nothing left to do with it. The trembling did not stop. It went on, steady, the same rhythm, like something winding down that never quite got there. His ears stayed flat. His eyes stayed on the door. I stayed where I was. The kitchen light hummed a little overhead, the way it always had, and past the window the yard held its shape in the dark, empty, and gave nothing back.